question started with a very, very interesting word, unnecessary. We ought to define that before we go any further talking about regulations. What are the unnecessary regulations and what are the necessary regulations? Let's talk about those a little bit. Shall we talk about clean air? Is it good to have asthma among all of our children? Or is it important to regulate emissions and air quality? You like a little bit of arsenic and mercury for your kids? EPA is regulating the air quality of the coal-fired power plants, and a lot of the rhetoric you hear comes from coal-fired power plants that say that's unnecessary. Maybe for them, but it is necessary for the children. They want to talk about Wall Street and the collapse of the financial institutions. Clearly, in the case of deregulation, where the government did not regulate, did not hold accountable, and did not enforce the existing regulations, let alone write decent regulations to protect all of us, homeowners as well as lenders. Regulation, necessary, unnecessary? How about deep water drilling? Remember what happened in the coast, in the Gulf Coast, where there was very little regulation and very little oversight. And now new regulations are in place dealing with how drilling is going to take place in the ocean, off in the ocean. Is it necessary or unnecessary? It just turns out that had we used the regulations that Norway had, that accident probably would never have occurred. The toughest regulations in the world that the oil industry finds they can use off the coast of Norway. We have yet to write those kind of regulations to protect millions of people and hundreds of billions of dollars of resources. We talk about health care, the patient's Bill of Rights, stopping the insurance companies from discriminating against everybody in this room, whether you're old, whether you have a pre-existing condition, whether you're a woman or a man or your age. Those are regulations that protect us. So when we talk about regulations, we ought to be very careful when we use the word unnecessary. It's easily thrown around, but then when it affects your personal health, when it affects your children's well-being and the air in which they breathe or have to breathe, we ought to be really careful. And we ought to use regulations that are wise. You may want to note that in the last 4 years, 3.5 years, the Obama administration has issued fewer regulations than in the previous administration and has repealed and modified many more than were done in the previous 8 years. So regulations are constantly subject to change as circumstances change, as the economy and as the population changes. And that's not a bad thing. But be careful when you say just toss the necessary around, because many regulations are necessary for your health as well as your children's.